Welcome to Basis 46, Part 1. Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. This is a book by Cara St. Louis, and it's Harald Kautz Vella, who has flown the whole way from Frankfurt, driven all night through from Switzerland to get to a plane, to come here and to deliver Basis 46. The concepts, the alarming information, and the science in Basis 46 is probably the heaviest that we've ever had to deal with. Basically, in summary, we're talking chemtrails, scalar waves, acoustic waves, neg entropy, and time reversal. DNA and scalar resonance through different dimensions and realities. And they like our biophotons and the transmutation of elements. And that's just part one. There's only one way to deal with this. Just listen. If you don't understand, just keep paying attention. But people will have to get across the science behind scalar wave technology. And probably the easiest and simple way to get across that is to look up the works of Tom Bearden. He's by no means exclusive to this field of physics, but physics it is, and you need to know and understand it. When people talk about radio waves or energy waves or light waves, we're dealing with electromagnetic vector waves, acoustic waves, or waves generated when one particle hits another particle and they're slightly different and they generate a scalar wave, the scalar potential. And there's a whole pile of stuff all about that. And that is how the Earth makes the black goo. This is the definitive basis on the black goo. We've had David Griffin talk about how it was a spoil of war with the Falklands, and that was where we got our hands on it, that is to say the Brits. But it's in oil, and oil, as with all the other elements that we deal with on this planet, seem to be manufactured by the planet. The matter that's here is different than it is elsewhere, but not totally different. We don't want to go into the details. The point is that the black goo is the seed of life that creates us. It's made in the earth, it travels through the earth at great speeds, and it makes the energy vortices and energies which we pick up and call ley lines. The problem is that by directed intent, a new or different black goo was deliberately seeded onto this planet about 80,000 years ago through a series of clusters of meteor showers which impregnated the Earth's crust, and this toxic, incompatible black goo emerged, and it's causing us a lot of problems. Now, there were a lot of discussions with Harald off camera. One involved giant spiders, and I think we may cover that in part 3. Anyway, Basis 46, covering chemtrails, scalar acoustic waves, neg entropy, that's the opposite to entropy, time reversed, DNA, scalar potentials, and these creatures eat on our biophotons. It's their biophotons they want. The biological photons that comprise your light energy, which is you as a living being. They live off that and they love it. And ultimately transmutation of the elements. This has taken a great deal out of me personally. I've even lost friends in the last week. This has been too much for many people. Harald spoke the next day, immediately after this recording, at the Basis conference at Woodborough, and we'll be including that as an edit as soon as we can.
The sensation of the black goo forms is different. One is full of empathy, you have a heart in there, and one is cold and empathy-free.
A lot of details here, a lot of information, very serious stuff. Basis 46, part 1. Okay? Right. Harold, we're talking about black goo, smart dust, but you've got something you want to say first. You want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, maybe I should do that. I'm coming from Germany. I'm into many fields of research. I've been doing free energy for quite a while. I stepped a little bit into medical research, starting with electrosensitivity. And at a certain point I had to start to deal with environmental monitoring. And this is what brought me to the position where I dare to state that we now are able to understand what are chemtrails composed of. Maybe not all of the components, but the most important one, how the technical part goes together, works together. And when you start to understand the technical aspects, you can also go into the agendas behind. And this is something that is getting very exciting because it's not one agenda, it's at least 3 or 4 agendas that are running in parallel, driven by different groups of interest.
Now, about chemtrails, how do you know what's in a chemtrail? Because, I mean, you can't go up there with a test tube and go to the back of the plane and say, right, that's actually
Correct.
coming out of the plane. And that's a big criticism that pilots and things would say that, I mean, they certainly don't seem to know anything about it. And it's all just poppycock. I mean, what do you say about that?
It is difficult. As long as you're on the ground, you cannot measure what is happening in the sky. But if you really try to put a spot on a topic, you need to take many different angles and look at the things from different angles. And if the pictures you get kind of very much fit onto each other, then you can be sure about what you see. Like, for example, if you look at the sky just with your normal eyes, you cannot tell a chemtrail from a contrail, but what you can tell is that every evening on the sunny side of the evening sky you have stripes. On the star side of the evening sky you have a very clean and pure view onto the stars, which explicitly says you have something in the air that is photoionizing, that is sensitive to the light of the sun, and as soon as you have the light of the sun on whatever is up there, it is producing current, and the current on the particles or whatever it is producing vapor, so it's getting cloudy. This is something that is definitely not natural. This is only one single thing you can say from looking in the sky. It's an experience everybody can
What are
do.
people looking at? What should they be looking at exactly?
Just when the sun goes down, mostly the sun is hidden by stripes, by persistent contrails. And if you then just turn around by 180 degrees and you look on the half of the sky that is already dark, you will not see any stripes. During nighttime you don't have stripes. If this would be vapor, like people tell, it would be there day and night. And there's no other explanation than that you have some particles in the air that are photoionizing, that are taking in sunlight, produce current, get into a plasma state, and then this plasma state is attracting the vapor from the humidity and create this hazy stripes and clouds. So there is definitely something photoionizing. The second thing you see is really strange rainbow-like structures in the clouds in certain angles from the sun. And this also from water and ice crystals, you know, the angles. These structures are not similar to the natural rainbow. There must be something chemical, something crystalline, something unnatural in the sky producing these halo effects.
Now, can you use a spectral analysis to see what's actually happening with the sky? To see what
would be possible, but just the view of it at this point is enough, because you have many more things. Then you go into chemical analysis of soil, rainwater, and plant material, and you get this fingerprint of barium, strontium, titanium, and aluminum. Everywhere around the world where you have problems with plant death, you have this fingerprint. It's not enough to kill plants if you look into the school books, but you have this fingerprint. Then you look into the history of the development of geoengineering technologies, and you find that they started experimenting with mixtures of aluminum oxide and metal salts. And if you go into the military domain, explicitly the metal salt used is barium strontium titanate. And there you have your fingerprint. You have barium, strontium, titanium, and aluminum in this mixture of particles. Just if you study patents and literature about what has been invented for cloud seeding and weather manipulation and climate engineering. So you have the fingerprint, you have kind of the literature about the technology. Then you go into the military domain and you find the chemtrail class of the US Air Force Academy. It's all public. It's public domain. It's in the university libraries where you have a...
So there is actually a chemtrail academy.
There's an US Air Force Academy, and within the chemical department you have the chemtrail class. And there they teach how they do it. And they do it by spray pyrolysis. They insert certain chemicals, weak metal salts, diluted with water or with methane.
Is this in the fuel, or is it a different...
It can be used as a fuel additive. There are different methods to do it. We don't know how actually they do it on military planes. But basically what you need to do, you need to take the metal salts, get them into a liquid. It can be water. It can be something that is burning as well. And then you create...
in other words, is this added during combustion?
It is added into the air that is sucked in to the combustion process as a very fine vapor, like with.
So it's not in the fuel.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Because you need you need to control the particle size, and controlling the particle size you can do by defining the size of the droplets you produce, and this is done by ultrasound. Different ultrasounds frequency produce different sizes of droplets, and then the droplet goes with the air into the engine, into the combustion process, and there it dries out or burns and creates nanocrystals. And it's exactly the same.
How is this introduced in the engine then? I mean,
at the entrance of the engine, you have a nozzle that is spraying droplets of liquid into the air that is sucked into.
Now this
the
is
engine.
after the primary engine cowling, the big fan that we would see from the outside.
Before this there should be a nozzle blowing in these vapors.
So, but that would mean you'd be able to see some kind of extra nozzle in front of the engine somewhere. Is it,
you can see it in every normal civil plane. If you, I just came to London with a plane. I checked all the planes that I could see. They all have a kind of nozzle in front of the engine. If you ask the engineers, they say it's a temperature sensor. So I'm not 100% sure about if this is the thing, but there is something that looks like a nozzle in front of every engine. And in the military part, we don't have possibilities to look into the planes, but this is how it is done by the book. And actually, it goes much further. If you look not into the chemical analysis, but if you look into the microscopy of raindrops and snow, you find all those particles. And you can exactly define by crystallography what mineral you can see. And all those minerals, you find the barium strontium titanate, you find aluminum oxide, you find manganese oxide, and all these particles, if you look into the literature of industrial nanoparticle production, all the particles you find in industry are produced by spray pyrolysis. So these are so many different angles to have a look at what you find in environmental analysis, that actually it is overdetermined. It's not something hinting to something that could be like this. You have many hints that hint to exactly the same procedure and exactly the same concept. And it's easy to be done. Even if you would say parts of the chemistry are within the fuel, then it's not a miracle that nobody is confronted with the fact that he is doing this, because in Europe the fuel is coming to Rotterdam in big ships, and from there you have 8,000 kilometers underground pipeline to the military airports, and from there it goes directly into the plane. And I talked to many people from the German army. Nobody knows what is in the fuel they use. They are being told.
They're told what? They're told. Sorry. I mean, they're told what's in the fuel.
What they say is this is just kerosene of minor quality. This is why it smells so bad. But it is not. If you put your finger into it, your finger is completely white. Yeah, so this is not typical for diesel or kerosene. I know soldiers who steal it to run their little airplane models. You know, if you just do this as a sport to fly small models of airplanes, stealing JP8 is a good idea because this burns like hell, and it's really fun to fly with it. So
you mean your little planes can fly like blazes? Huh?
Yeah. So they usually steal JP8 for fun reasons, and nobody of these soldiers in the German army are allowed to look inside the chemistry of this fuel. They are told that it's just cheap fuel. They realize it's not, because they get a massive headache if they're exposed to the fumes. And but there's no one within the German army who would have access to records what they really put in. It's delivered with pipelines, it's put into the planes, and then it's used. And the same thing is done.
That's a classic time where people could get that fuel and have it analysed.
I'm still trying to get some samples. Until now, nobody had the guts to steal and bring it into the environmental monitoring. It's classified information. People get into trouble.
So you would have to analyse it in a non-listed laboratory, a private lab that could do the analysis.
Yes, an official lab would not dare to touch JP8. This is a legal problem.
Right. Well, maybe there's another country somewhere that it might be
possible. But even if you have an analysis, then to make a legal case out of it, you would need to say where you got it from. And latest then people get into trouble. So this is not easy to handle. But actually I'm not too keen on messing up with the US military on that level. We know enough about what is in the raindrops and in the snow and in the soil that we can kind of deduct the concept behind it. So this is giving a very clear picture of what they do. And this is kind of like, I tend to describe it as onion layers of onion peels. You have the outer structure. This is just military technology.
Yeah, this is the onion. The onion analogy.
This is what you see from outside. It is connected to the rocket shield. They utilize to protect the Western countries from Russian attacks. And this is something, but basically it's openly discussed. You have a particulate plasma that is, it's possible to activate it with microwave radiation. You need HARP-type devices to activate it. And once...
exactly how do you activate it? I mean, HARP is a sort of, it's not microwave, it's a shortwave.
It's microwave.
It's microwave.
It's microwave, and these.
And again, there's lots of different HARPs around the northern hemisphere.
Yes, but for activation you use microwave, because part of the particulate plasma is this barium strontium titanate. This is piezoelectric crystal with very elaborated electro-optical properties, and it's made for being activated by all kinds of radiation.
But I mean, the radiation from the sun will do that.
It does, yeah. It photoionizes, but if there's no sun, you can use it also during night by shooting a microwave onto it. And then once it's activated, you can do all sorts of things. You can modulate waves on it. You can heat it up to 10,000 degrees to make rockets just melt to pieces. You know, if a rocket is coming and you heat up the air in front of the rocket, it will not survive more than 30 seconds. 10,000 degrees is quite a bit. So you can destroy military vehicles. You can actually this barium strontium titanate has abilities that go into the field of scalar physics. And with scalar physics,
that's something we want to really talk about later.
Yeah, there are many more possible applications with scalar physics. It's like having something that is processing and transporting energy from here to there. The energy is caught in the field. The field is kind of sent in between the particles. And if you learned how to control the field, you can up-concentrate energy at any spot you want. So this is when the people in the military domain talk about possibilities like making nuclear bomb-like explosions by discharging scalar fields. This is something that is discussed. It is within the possibilities of physics at that point.
Again, Tom Bearden's work would be able to...
Yeah, he brought the basics to it, to the knowledge.
You can pull energy out of a zone as well as put energy in.
Yes.
A cold explosion, yes. That's an implosion, really.
It's basically this scalar energy is like a binary soul that is carried by the field, that can freely move through the field, triggered by external inputs. So you can move the energy to the place where you need it, you can make it vibrate, and you can make it turn into heat, you can make it turn into electromagnetic radiation, you can make it turn into sound, whatever you want. It is open to all directions. This is due to the properties of this special piezoelectrics.
Those sounds that people were hearing, these in the air.
No, it's not in the air. The sounds people hear are created within the nervous system because the particles used for the particulate plasma are embedded within the body and they connect to the nervous system of humans. But this is already part of the second agenda. This is not military, this is intelligence community stuff. We need to take them bit by bit and layer by layer to really understand how it goes together.
Today's paper, they were talking about some sound in Northern Ireland people were all hearing. Something they were strangely hearing. But
possible that the sound is... I know two effects. Sometimes you have a real sound that you can record as a sound, then it must be particles that transfer it into the acoustic realm. Sometimes it's that people hear sounds that are not out there. And then it's basically the same effect, but happening within the body.
In other words, it's stimulating a sensation of sound.
It's stimulating piezoelectric particles within the nervous system. They attach to the nervous system, and then you can stimulate them by electromagnetic waves, and then the nervous system is simulating the effect of sound, basically.
What kind of sound? Voices?
Whatever you can insert a speaking voice into a human brain.
So-called so-called synthetic telepathy.
Yeah, exactly. But that is the second agenda. Military part is rocket shield, is weather control, is induction of earthquakes, if you want so, with certain frequencies. You can make properties of water at 10 kilometers depth go berserk and trigger earthquakes. This is known since the 60s. This is why certain prospection methods in geology were forbidden, because they were basically looking for ore and oil. with these technology, and they triggered earthquakes with very low energy levels, and HAARP has 1,000,000 times more energy levels or energy content and is able to trigger the same frequencies. So what you can see is the 10 kilometers. This is the point within the crust where this special property of the water can be triggered. And if you look at the lists of earthquakes happening during the last 10 years, you always have those countries who did something that the United States didn't like, and then you have an earthquake triggered at 10 kilometers depth. And normally they should be more like evenly distributed on different depths. If it's only tectonics, not connected to this water thing, it should happen here and there and on 25 kilometers and on 2 kilometers. It should be evenly distributed. But at the moment, I think 70% of all earthquakes, 70–80% are at 10 kilometers. This cannot be natural. So this is military domain. And
that's scalar earthquake generation. Is that what it is?
Yes. No. Yes. Scalar is in the front line. They use scalar waves to get the effect done. You need normal electromagnetic waves extracted, radio waves at, I think it's 11 hertz, very low frequency, and this can be done by modulation. To have these certain frequencies you need to trigger earthquakes.
What did you modulate? What carrier wave would you modulate, or what would that be?
I don't know exactly how they do it, but imagine you create a plasma and you have the ability by electromagnetic waves to make the plasma vibrate. Then you have flowing current in the sky, and with flowing current in the sky, you can, it's like a transformer, you can generate normal electromagnetic signals. Don't ask me how exactly they trigger it.
Okay.
But if you control the scalar field, you control all the rest, because all the rest of the fields are just aspects of the mother field. You can see this if you go back in the history of physics. It has been formulated very clearly with Maxwell and other researchers up to the 20s, and then they forgot about the notation of scalar fields because it was not necessary for the normal physics for engineers that produce normal technologies. They didn't need the full notation of these electromagnetism. But it is...
Are you referring to the gerrymandering of Maxwell's equations?
Yes.
Large parts of that equation have been removed.
Maxwell had a notation that was displaying a 4D with 3 different solutions of the general field equation. And if you look at the military technology, they operate with a full 4D. It is exactly the same knowledge that is utilized for military technologies. Maxwell described the mathematics, and then the civil domain forgot just about 2 of the 3 equations, solutions of the equation. They forgot about scalar waves. And
well, forget's being very kind. Surely, I mean, you mentioned in the car that was specifically removed.
If you like, yes and no. It was. They had difficulties to measure those fields back then. Tesla did at least measure longitudinal waves. That was possible. This is on purpose. Had been forgotten on purpose. To measure scalar fields is not so easy. We have artifacts from that time. We know exactly that, for example, Victor Schauberger developed measurement equipment for scalar fields.
Now, can you explain the difference between a scalar field and, for instance, a magnetic field or an electric field? Because that's a sort of a scalar quantity, isn't it?
Yeah, for the general audience, it's just to get a picture of it. If you have a normal electromagnetic propagating wave, this is like a sine. This is a direction of propagation, and the vibration of the field is in a right angle to the direction of propagation. If you take 2 of these waves that have the same frequency but opposite vibration direction and you overlay them, then all the components that go in a right angle from the direction annihilate each other. And what is left over is a longitudinal field. This is all that can be. If you have all the aspects that go to the sides, same strength, opposite direction, the sum is 0, so you don't have anything left that is going to the side. So all that can be left is a longitudinal wave. This is something untypical for electromagnetics. We use it in mobile phones. It is stable for the first 1.5 meters. And then it kind of dissolves and is getting...
You're saying they're using scalar waves in mobile phones?
No, longitudinal waves.
Okay, well.
Now, if you take 2 longitudinal waves and overlay them in a way that they also annihilate each other, then you get a scalar wave.
Right, okay.
So it is like you take the basic wave that physics knows, also at universities, and you start overlaying them in a way that the electromagnetic aspects cancel each other out. Then you get kind of the next higher solution of the general field equation. So you start with transversal waves, annihilation makes a longitudinal wave, annihilation is like a standing wave in acoustics, is producing a scalar wave. And if you are able to build antennas for scalar waves that up-concentrate this energy at a certain point, then you create scalar potential. And this is kind of the 4th dimension Maxwell was talking about. A scalar potential is kind of a number value that is the property of each 3D point. And this is what just in terms of mathematics is giving you a 4th dimension, if you want so. And then it's getting interesting because if you understand scalar potential and have realized that this is something that is self-organizing, you find the source for all these fractal beauty in nature. This is self-organization of scalar potential eddies. And they are throwing these beautiful fractal pictures, and this is what is giving shape and form to natural beings. Yeah, so
you're talking about the physical domain of existence then?
Yes. There's lots to discover in this area.
But likewise, the physical domain of existence could be collapsed. It's a bit like that's what happened at 9/11. That was a scalar attack. Is that right? Which dissolved the building into dust.
There are many theories to 9/11. One that is correct is that they used a scalar weapon that is known from ancient times, from Vedic times, as Shiva's fire, which is collapsing matter on atomic level to a kind of white dust. You find these weapons in the ancient scripts, and there are some people who say that it had been back-engineered by people, and there are rumors that Tesla experimented with it, but he didn't put it to practice because he was not so into weapon development. I know in person, I know a few people who played around with these technologies to basically to cut tunnels into stone. It was not about destroying entire cities, but they utilized the effects to disintegrate matter for purposes of mining.
Is this something like the Hutchison effect?
Yeah, it's the same physics, different effects. You can make many things. It depends how you combine things. You can combine scalar fields with acoustics, and then you control gravity. And then
a scalar field with acoustics and you're controlling gravity. What exactly does that mean? The term anti-gravity is the incorrect term, but or we've heard the term electrogravitic. Is that what you're talking about?
For example, if you look into how the monks in Himalaya build their monasteries, the tradition says that they use the trumpet and meditation. Meditation produces thoughts, and thoughts are scalar waves. And if you play the trumpet in a way that you deeply go into the sound with your soul. You synchronize acoustic and scalar wave. And then they took the trumpet and moved the rocks up the hill with the trumpet. We can take it a bit slower, using things that basically everybody can buy in a shop. There's one application that is not in electromagnetics but in acoustics that is very beautifully explaining the possibilities of scalar physics. If you build
Okay, now I have always been confused then by the way you generated a scalar wave. Now, could we just come up with some basic concepts of definitions for ordinary people?
Yes.
A lot of people use the term electromagnetic wave when they're not dealing with that at all. For instance, a static, the kind of electric field that people would find in a crop circle is because of the standing static charge of the crop. But they would then call that an electromagnetic wave. So could you just basically give us some basic definitions of what's what, so that people can understand what you're talking about there? We're talking about acoustic waves, control of gravity here. Can you just explain that for ordinary folk?
I'll do my best. Actually, before Nikola Tesla started to study electromagnetics, he studied, I think, 3 or 4 years acoustics, because acoustic is a push wave, longitudinal wave. Now, if I start to deal with acoustics, there are very beautiful examples of how this works.
Sorry, what do you mean? You almost said transverse wave there.
Transversal is like a sine, and longitudinal is like sound, vibrating in the direction of propagation.
Ah, okay,
yeah?
That's what it's called.
This is the first distinguishing you need to do. Now, if you look into acoustics, if you're a musician, you want to record your music, you go into a studio. The first thing you do is you take out most of the echo by building absorbing elements on the walls. Then you go into the studio and you measure the self-resonance of the room that is left. Like you tune through all different tones, like woo, going up, and then you record the amplitude, and you find certain points that are too loud, where you have a resonance in the room where the sound is amplifying itself.
And for instance, that resonance effect is used in church organs to make a small sound very loud.
Yeah. And then you want to get rid of this resonance to have smooth and normal levels on all tones. And then you use a Helmholtz resonator. It looks like a loudspeaker box with a bus opening, these holes in the loudspeakers, but it doesn't have a loudspeaker. It's just a resonant box where the volume is resonant on the frequency you want to eliminate, and the length of the pipe of the hole is resonant to the frequency you want to eliminate. And then you put it in the corner of your studio. And then something really miraculous happens. This Helmholtz resonator is starting to resonate with the frequency that you want to eliminate, and it starts resonating, and then the box is sending out an inverted signal into the room, and then all the frequency, the acoustic energy that is distributed in the room is using this inverted signal like a railroad, and it's traveling into the box. And then you have like stone wool in the box, and the stone wool is dissipating the energy and killing the resonance on that point. And this works in every normal music studio on the planet. And this is a miracle, because I have equally distributed sound energy in a room that is on its own, traveling into the corner of the room, going into a box, into a little hole, turning itself into a heat energy. If I would be clever, I would say, no, we fucked up the second law of thermodynamics, because we made energy up concentrate on its own on one point, and we build a power plant out of this. And it doesn't make sense in acoustics, but if you use the same effect in electromagnetics, you are immediately into the research Tesla did. Like he said, we have all these electromagnetic waves in the magma in the core of the Earth, where you have excited hot liquids, molten stone, that is moving very fast, and these eddies and vortices create electromagnetic fields. He wanted to extract that energy, so he just built an electromagnetic Helmholtz resonator that was kind of sending a little signal down to Mother Earth, and then on this railroad, the entire energy from the core of the Earth traveled back into his little instrument he used just to tease the right frequencies. And this is where people say that he almost destroyed San Francisco because his house started to shake from all the energy coming back. So this is kind of the basic application.
So was this what his tower? He built this tower, or is that to transmit energy?
No. The transmitter already. This up concentration happens if you have asymmetric structures. If you have a small source and a big area to extract energy from, then you get these asymmetric things. This is kind of violating the laws of thermodynamics, and this is the basic principle for all electromagnetic free energy applications, that you kind of create negentropy by having these two longitudinal waves uniting to one scalar wave that is creating this kind of effect of, you can call it time reversal. The one wave that is...
They call it the phase conjugate of the time reversed wave.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that the energy follows the path of the initial wave which came towards it, and it's called a time reverse because it goes back over the path that wave created.
And it is real time reversal. You can see this if you look into the stars. We have Kozyrev in Russia, who built an advanced telescope to collect non-optical signals from space. And he was watching Andromeda Galaxy. And he found the Andromeda Galaxy 3 times. He found it where it is normally in the sky. This is the signal traveling with the light, coming out of the past. Then he found the Andromeda Galaxy at the point where it is right now, in this second, in real time, not traveling with the speed of light, but being there instantly, the signal. And he found a third signal with a light that is coming from the future, traveling backwards in time. So
this is really important, because when people look up at the sky, they're looking at a massively distorted convolution of the stars in different time zones and locations. It's a huge mess. In other words, you can't sort of just point your finger in your Star Trek warp drive and go to that point, because by the time you think about going there, it's already not there in the first place.
It's the concept of future light cone.
Is there any research that people could look up on that particular aspect you just described?
Just I mentioned Kozyrev because he clearly could show that this time reversal is not as
How do you
if...
spell that again, just for the viewer?
Kozyrev.
Okay.
Don't ask me for the first name.
Kozyrev. With a K?
With a K-O-S-Y-S.
Well, we'll look it up. Okay.
Kozyrev. Blended in. Kozyrev.
With a V at the end.
So. I started with hydrodynamics in 2001, 2002. Then I stepped slowly into, when you start to understand water vortices and the electromagnetic aspects of water vortices, then you jump into, or I jumped into the electromagnetic aspects of it. It's MHD, magnetohydrodynamics. And then you realize that you have certain field symmetries in magnetohydrodynamics that create all the effects described in scalar physics. And then you start to understand that water vortices are basically nothing else than scalar antennas that are both sending and receiving. And then you can understand why simple water vortices collect and up-concentrate energy, or lose energy, depending on their size and geometry and motion pattern. This was kind of my path where and how I jumped into this research. That was basically the first things I did in fringe science. It's not fringe, but I wanted to understand Schauberger, so I went into details.
It's not fringe, but it's certainly suppressed. It's not put in the public domain.
Scalar waves are transmitting information instantly. The time it needs, it is half the wavelength to transmit information independent from distance. This is how it transmits information. It doesn't transmit energy, it just transmits information.
Now that's very important. We're dealing with states of order then when you're talking about information.
Yeah.
So you're actually transmitting entropy or neg entropy?
You transmit information. Entropy or negentropy is depending on the symmetry of the fusion of two fields. If it's kind of two fields with 180 degree, you don't have entropy, you don't have negentropy, you just have a normal scalar wave. The moment it becomes cone-shaped, you have time reversal involved, and then you get into a negentropic state of physics.
Because that's interesting, because in order to modulate an FM wave, a frequency modulated wave, you need the non-linear aspect of a diode curve. That seems to be something similar. We're dealing with information transfer. So the asymmetric aspects of the form creates an information transfer.
Yes.
And it's faster than light. It's instant.
You look at the lifters, for example, lifter technology. You have this asymmetric effect.
What's lifter technology?
You have, this is electrogravity. If you have a capacitor that you charge with a very high voltage, it always accelerates in the direction of the positive charged pole. But only if the capacitors are asymmetric. If you have one small one and one big one. And we have lots of people who play around with this knowledge. It's coming from P.T. Brown.
We went past Silbury Hill, that's an asymmetric capacitor. It's sitting on mica, it's asymmetric in shape, it's a cone.
Yes.
And it's generating some kind of field which is information transfer. Then.
Look at a pyramid, look at these, how do you call them, these very...
certain structures,
building structures, the second typical Egyptian form.
Well, a lot of structures we're looking at in the City of London, for instance, seems to have particular designs to affect things.
Yeah, the asymmetry is a very interesting point in physics, for sure. Opening up possibilities to negentropy, to information transfer, and if it's kind of united with acoustics, you get a second set of possibilities, like utilizing anti-gravity.
Now, anti-gravity being the wrong term, of course.
Levitation is a more beautiful one.
Yeah, what is actually happening with anti-gravity? You talked about that, you actually mentioned it.
Gravity, following Einstein, gravity is a result of the curvature of space-time. The curvature of space-time is nothing else than the gradient in scalar potential. This is where it unites with Maxwell. And once you are able to manipulate the scalar potential at a certain point in the 3D, you can invert the gravity structure, and then you cause levitation. For example, if you have a water vortice that runs at certain frequencies and is self-strengthening and in resonance with natural frequencies and everything, that it has the possibility to accumulate a scalar potential, then it pumps itself full with scalar potential, and suddenly, normally you have a structure that is associated with the gravity field of the Earth. Suddenly you have a point that is kind of inverting the entire thing, and then your water vortice will try to lift off and create anti-gravity, or will try to levitate. This is what happens in the lab. You have, if you have fast water vortices, you have time phenomena.
Now there's a lot of
So,
people talking about how time is getting really quick. I mean, wow, this week went so quickly and things.
This is subjective observation of time. This is something else. It is more connected to biorhythm and time qualities than to the hard physics. But curvature of space-time is connected to time density. A scalar wave you can also express as a time density wave. And if it's only a wave, the average is plus minus the same. If you kind of up-concentrate scalar potential, then the overall time flow is getting slower. So
now this is important because with scalar physics you can actually use it for teleportation. In terms, you can take a time-space domain, reduce it, and then transmit the information of that time-space domain to another location. Is that right?
We didn't go that far in the lab. I heard about possibilities. I know people who worked on the concept of quantum copying machines and stuff like this. I've even seen one, but they never dared to try to.
Because we're now living in an era of smart sand and 3D photocopying and things, because it means that they must have the ability to transmit shape into a medium. So would that not mean they've got teleportation? Extrapolating. I'm not far enough developed in physics to be able to explain these effects. I have an idea that there might be space for this at a certain time to kind of adopt the theory to the point. Okay, well,
I cannot explain.
In this first hour, could just start getting the basic terms explained and explain what they mean, because in order to try and bring people along here so they can understand the concepts we're talking about here.
Maybe it makes sense to go into biology to see how scalar waves control biology. Let's say this is in DNA and this is in DNA. We know that one of the functions of DNA is emitting single photons. This is what we call biophotons. A single photon is always a longitudinal wave. It's just one wavefront emitted. So now I have one photon coming from here to there, one photon coming from there to here. And if the two have the same frequency, they will annihilate each other, constituting a joint scalar field between two DNAs.
So when the two wavefronts come together, they go to zero, but do they not emit a scalar wave?
They form a scalar wave.
Right, but they don't annihilate. Or they
annihilate the electromagnetic component, and all the energy that is annihilated goes into the scalar field and is adding up to the scalar potential of the two DNAs. So if I have millions of DNAs sending light back and forth, it adds very, very much energy to the scalar potential of the human being. This is what we call the vibration of human. And if you go into the esoteric or spiritual world, hiring the vibration, the frequency of a human means nothing else than hiring the scalar potential caught within his biophoton transfer. And you can explain many, many things with these.
Sorry, is this meaning that the light body, that the people refer
Yes.
to the DNA emitting light,
The
cells emitting light?
Yeah, the light body is getting stronger. This is what evolution is about. getting stronger and stronger and stronger.
So essentially you glow and you become a being of light.
Yes. This is why holy people shine.
Yeah, this is the shining ones.
Yeah.
The Illuminati.
No.
No, about the Illuminati are the illuminated ones. The
They
original
think
ones
they
before,
are.
before they were corrupted.
Okay, I don't talk about the original ones. So the ones we know today are not shining very bright.
No, and there's a whole thing about this we need to talk about, we discussed in the car, but let's get the basic concepts. Okay, continue. We've got about 10 minutes left in this part.
Okay. Okay, so now we can understand certain beautiful things in nature. For example, if I extract my blood, send it to Australia, sit in front of a TV and watch a horror movie. Then the second when I see ugly pictures, my blood in Australia will start to produce hormones relating to the thing I see. This is because the biophoton exchange in the annihilated state is completely independent of distance. It tunnels through the entire planet because it is a standing wave, it is a scalar wave that transmits information instantly.
Now this is interesting because I refer to John Irwin. He was able to go through what was called the death process, but he was able to go to different parts of his DNA in different dimensions and see through the being in those dimensions what was going on, and then come back to his body in this reality. So is that the basic principle?
This is going far beyond the basic principle. I could understand
It's crucial that his DNA was somewhere else.
The biophoton transfer we can understand only with a two-strand DNA. Now, if you go back to Maxwell and say actually we're living in a 4D, and what we see as reality is a space-time sheet out of the more complex 4D, then of course I can imagine that a DNA is something much more complex, and the two-strand DNA is one kind of cross-cut in our reality. And if I go to other cross-cuts on different energy levels of the scalar potential, one below I will find a 12-strand DNA, and maybe I will find more. This is very similar to the theory of transmutation that has been developed out of the scalar physics. If you look, we do this in Germany. We take water and higher the scalar potential of the water in a vortice long enough to make it transmute to mineral oil, or not mineral oil, but something similar to diesel. And this happens instantly.
We're talking alchemy here.
Something like this. Basically, no, it's Schauberger. Schauberger wrote the patents, he did it, and people just copied Schauberger and worked a little bit on the details, and it works. And it's incredible what is possible if one would build these devices in Syria. They would amortize, they would bring back the money they cost within 4 hours by producing diesel oil with the prices we have today. This is game-changing technology. This is why it's not going to appear on markets.
But is we're dealing with resonance here and translating in the scalar field. Is that right?
I just mention it because it's the same geometry we find in this transmutation. We transmute hydrogen to carbon to silica. So we go from a 2 structure to a 12 structure. And the same development of geometries you find in a 2-strand DNA transmuting itself to a 12-strand when the spiritual development has collected enough scalar potential to get the shift from one space-time sheet to a second one. This is all incredibly coherent in geometry. All you need to manage is to get this 4D into your head, to make it something sensible, and then you start to see the pictures, and you start to see how physics works.
But that would make the periodic table a scalar chart.
Yes, you find this.
The fundamental initial vibration, which is the dot, the event.
It's all published by Walter Russell in the 20s, 30s. He is displaying the full knowledge about the real table of elements, and he is adding to the one we have the transmutation lines, and he's putting numbers to it. He's exactly saying with what frequency and what light quality is connected to what transmutation line, so that you can help out and trigger these effects.
Now, in the disinformation war that we are living in, the Bob Lazar situation about the UFO at Area 51 was this element 115.
Mm.
Is that giving us a clue as to what they're really talking about then, in terms of what elements they were doing to create some kind of warp space device, trans-dimensional device? Is there a clue then that we can look at that? Element 115.
I didn't go into that.
Yeah, but the element 115,
can't tell you at the moment.
It was used to generate the gravity wave in the narrative of Bob Lazar and the flying saucer. I'm trying to connect a lot of dots here. And if that was a clue they gave us to work something out in terms of giving us stepping stones through the periodic table, if you've got element 115, and the way that was made would tell you how they opened their gates, these UFO things. No? Is that too much of a step?
I know there are many things involved in these spacecraft technologies. 115 could be just a smart way to produce a stable plasma. It could be more to it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know the technology they use. So
yeah, well, no, I'm just suggesting that by telling us that number, maybe they were giving us a clue based on what you just said about the periodic table, the real periodic
funny
table.
idea. Find 115 in Walter Russell's table of elements, and then maybe there's something to learn.
Really, why we just close on this was we're about to run out of on R1. What is his real table of elements relative to the other one that normal people would see at school or in university?
He's connecting dots in the sense of that he sees the inbuilt harmonies. And by seeing the inbuilt, it's music. For him, this table of elements is music. It follows the rules of music. And by understanding the music within the table, he can say what turns into what, because it's like an 440A going to an 880A and nothing else. Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of the transmutation lines he finds, and he's going beyond. He states that there are elements...
Well, we're just literally about to run out on that, and we'll quickly reassemble for part 2. But this is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating, Harald, and I really appreciate it. And it's a wonderful way of describing it.